There's something inside you that nothing can touch, something no criticism can wound, no rejection can shake, no loss can destroy, but you don't know where to find this place. Yet, most people spend their entire lives building walls, shields, emotional armor, trying to protect themselves from a world that seems to constantly attack. And the more they protect themselves, the more vulnerable they become. This is what Eckhart Tolle calls the great illusion. The illusion that something within you needs protection. Today, you'll uncover the secret he spent decades understanding, the invisible spiritual shield that already exists within you, waiting to be recognized. But first, I need to tell you a story about a man who lost everything, and in the moment of complete loss, found something indestructible. It was 1977. Eckhart was 29 years old, sitting in his London apartment, alone, depressed, without prospects. That night, something extraordinary happened. He woke at 3 a.m. with a strange feeling, like he was being watched, but not by someone, by something much more subtle. I can no longer live with myself. This phrase echoed in his mind, but then, suddenly, a question arose from nowhere. If I cannot live with myself, who is the I, and who is the myself? In that instant, something dissolved, like ice melting in the sun. An identity he had carried for decades simply vanished, and in place of that identity emerged a presence, calm, unshakable, invulnerable, not because it was strong, but because it was nothing that could be attacked. Have you ever felt this, those rare moments where something within you becomes completely imperturbable, where the things that usually affect you simply can't touch you? Most people experience this for a few seconds, maybe minutes, and then return to their normal state of constant vulnerability. But what Eckhart discovered that night changed everything. He realized this state wasn't temporary. It was his natural state. And ours too. The problem is, we spend our entire lives identifying with what can be hurt, with what can be attacked, with what can be lost. Eckhart calls this the body of pain. It's an energetic entity that lives within us, feeding on suffering and drama, resistance. And this entity convinces us that we are it, that we are vulnerable, that we need to protect ourselves. But there is something beyond the body of pain, something the body of pain cannot touch because it's not a thing. It's a space, the space of pure consciousness. Let me explain this in a way you can feel right now. Close your eyes for a moment. You don't need to meditate, just observe. Observe the thoughts. Observe the passing through your mind right now. Can you see the thoughts? Can you observe them? Now, who is observing the thoughts? Who is the observer? The observer is not a thought. It's something beyond thoughts, something that exists before thoughts, and that will continue to exist after the thoughts have passed. This observer is indestructible because it's not a thing. It's pure consciousness, and this consciousness cannot be hurt, cannot be attacked, cannot be destroyed. It's like the sky. Clouds pass through the sky, storms cross the sky, but the sky remains untouched, always blue, always serene, always present. Your true nature is like the sky, and all the problems, dramas, criticisms, rejections are like passing clouds. But here's the secret few understand. You don't need to fight the clouds. You don't need to protect yourself from them. You just need to remember that you are the sky. Does this sound too simple? Too abstract? Then let me show you how this works in practice. How this understanding can completely transform your life experience. Imagine someone criticizing you, severely, in front of others, something that would normally leave you furious or hurt. The average person reacts in two ways. They either attack back or they retreat, wounded. But there's a third option, an option Eckhart discovered, and that few know. You observe the criticism without resisting, without reacting. Just observe. And when you observe without resistance, something extraordinary happens. The criticism passes through you, like an arrow passing through space. There's nothing solid to be hit, no ego to be wounded, no identity to be attacked. There is only pure consciousness, observing everything with complete serenity. This is not passivity. This is true power, the power to be unshakable. Eckhart calls this the power of now, the power to be present beyond the reactive mind. But how do you cultivate this state? How do you access this invulnerability in times of crisis? The answer lies in what he calls the body of presence. It's different from the body of pain. It's the opposite of the body of pain. The body of presence is a subtle form of energy that emerges when you are completely present, when there is no resistance to the moment, when there is no story being created in your mind, and when this energy is active, you become literally untouchable. Not because you're protecting yourself, but because there is nothing there to be protected. Does this seem impossible? Let me give you a concrete example. Have you ever talked to someone who was completely present, completely centered, without any defensiveness or reactivity? You notice that you can't irritate that person. You can't knock them off center, no matter what you say or do. And that's not because they're controlling themselves. It's because they're not identified with anything that can be attacked. This is the difference between resistance and presence, between protection and invulnerability. Resistance creates a target. Presence dissolves the target. Now you might be thinking, this is too abstract. How do I apply this to my real life? How do I deal with toxic bosses, difficult relationships, financial pressures? These are exactly the situations where this invisible shield becomes most powerful. Let me tell you a story Eckhart shared in one of his talks, a story that shows how this works in the real world. There was a woman who worked for an extremely aggressive boss. Every day he yelled at her, humiliated her in front of her colleagues, created an environment of constant stress and anxiety. She tried all the conventional strategies. She confronted the boss, complained to HR, tried to shield herself emotionally. Nothing worked. She was reaching her limit. Then, someone told her about Eckhart's teachings, about the possibility of becoming unshakable without fighting. At first, she doubted how not to react to aggression, how not to defend herself, but she decided to experiment. On the next attack from the boss, she did something different. Instead of resisting or reacting, she connected with the space of consciousness within her, that space that observes without judgment, that space that simply is. And something extraordinary happened. The boss started yelling as usual, but his words seemed to pass right through her, as if she were transparent. She heard the words, but they found nothing solid to hit. No wounded ego, no offended identity. They found only presence, and for the first time in years then she remained completely calm, completely centered, completely unshakable. Most surprisingly, the boss noticed the shift. His rage simply found no fuel, no resistance to feed on. Within minutes he stopped yelling. He was confused and he left the room. This wasn't magic. This wasn't luck. This was the power of unconditional presence. When you offer no resistance, the attack has nowhere to latch onto. It's like trying to break space with a hammer. But let me be clear about something important. This doesn't mean becoming a doormat. This doesn't mean accepting abuse or injustice. Presence is not passivity. Presence is power. When you are truly present, your actions emerge from a place of clarity, of wisdom, of genuine strength. You can say no without anger. You can set boundaries without defensiveness. You can make difficult decisions without emotional drama. That's the difference between acting from a wounded ego and acting from awakened consciousness. The wounded ego reacts. Awakened consciousness responds. And when you respond from this place of presence, something magical happens. The people around you begin to feel this energy. They can no longer manipulate you emotionally. They can no longer drag you into unnecessary dramas. They can no longer knock you off center. You become like a mountain, immovable, serene, unshakable. But how do you access this state when you're in the middle of an emotional crisis, when someone has just deeply hurt you, when you're feeling anger, resentment, frustration? Eckhart teaches a simple yet revolutionary technique. He calls it the radical yes to what is. Let me explain. When something painful happens, our first reaction is to resist, to deny, to fight against reality. This shouldn't be happening. This isn't fair. I don't deserve this. This resistance is what creates the suffering. Not the event itself, but our resistance to the event. The radical yes is the opposite of resistance. It's accepting fully what's happening, without liking it, without agreeing with it, but without fighting against reality. It's saying, this is happening, and it's okay that it's happening, because it is. Does this sound like resignation? Like weakness? It's the exact opposite. The radical yes is the most powerful act there is. Because when you stop fighting against reality, all your energy becomes available to deal with the situation intelligently. Instead of wasting energy resisting what has already happened, you can focus on responding consciously to what's happening now. And when you respond from this place of total acceptance, you discover something surprising. Nothing can truly hurt you. Because you're no longer identified with what can be hurt. You are the space where the experience happens, and space cannot be damaged by experience. It's like a cinema. The movie can be violent, dramatic, tragic, but the screen remains untouched. Always white, always pure, always present. You are the screen, not the movie. This understanding changes everything, because when you know you are indestructible in your essence, you no longer need to protect yourself. You can open yourself completely to life. You can love without fear of being hurt. You can be vulnerable without feeling fragile. You can be totally authentic, because there's nothing left to protect or hide. This is what Eckhart discovered that night in 1977. And this is what is available to you now, at this very moment. You don't have to wait. You don't have to meditate for years. You don't have to read dozens of books. You just need to remember who you really are. Beyond the thoughts, beyond the emotions, beyond the story you tell yourself, that you are pure consciousness, indestructible, unshakable, eternal. And when you remember this, everything changes. The same situations that used to disturb you now become opportunities to practice presence. The same relationships that were once a source of drama now become mirrors for your awakening. The same challenges that once seemed impossible now become invitations to discover your true power. But there's one thing you need to understand about this process. It's not something you conquer once and for all. It's something you cultivate, moment by moment. Identification with the ego is a very old habit, and like any habit, it needs to be deconstructed with patience and consistency. There will be moments when you forget, moments when you revert to reacting from the wounded ego, moments when you feel vulnerable again. This is normal. This is part of the process. The important thing is not to be perfect. The important thing is to remember, to return to presence, to return to center as many times as necessary. And each time you remember, each time you return to this place of invulnerability, you strengthen this new way of being, like a muscle that gets stronger with exercise. Until one day, as you realize that it has become your natural way of existing, without effort, without techniques, without protections, just pure presence, navigating life with total serenity. And the people around you begin to ask, how do you do it? How do you manage to stay so calm in the midst of chaos? How does nothing seem to shake you? And you smile, because you know it's not anything you do. It's something you are. And in the end, you realize there was never anything to protect, never anyone to be hurt, never anything to be lost. There was only consciousness, playing at being human, experiencing pain and pleasure, joy and sadness, with total freedom. Because when you know you are indestructible, you can experience everything without fear. You can live completely, because there's nothing to lose. That's the greatest irony of human existence. When you stop trying to protect yourself, you discover you never needed protection. When you stop trying to be strong, you discover you were already invincible. When you stop fighting for peace, you discover you were always peace itself. And this discovery, my friend, is what Eckhart calls awakening, the recognition of your true nature, a nature that nothing can touch, nothing can hurt, nothing can destroy you, because there's simply nothing there to be destroyed. There's only you, eternal, infinite, unshakable. And now that you know this, nothing will ever be the same. But let me teach you something practical, something you can apply today, in the next 24 hours. Eckhart developed what he calls the 3 portals to presence. 3 simple ways to access this state of invulnerability in the midst of everyday life. The first portal is breathe, but not in the way you think. It's not about controlling your breath. It's about observing your breath. Right now, as you listen to this, notice your breath. Without changing it, just observe. Feel the air coming in. Feel the air going out. Feel the pause between the inhale and the exhale. And now, who is observing the breath? Who is aware of this process? That observer is your direct portal to invulnerability, because the observer never is born, never dies, never gets hurt. When someone criticizes you tomorrow, remember the breath, not to calm down. But to find the observer within you, the second portal is the body. Eckhart discovered something fascinating. When you are completely present in your body, it's impossible to be anxious, it's impossible to be depressed, it's impossible to be angry, because these emotions only exist when you are lost in thoughts about the past or the future. Try it now. Feel your feet. Really feel them. Feel your hands, the weight of your body. When you are fully present in your body, you are automatically present in the now. And in the now, there is no problem. Problems only exist in psychological time, in the mind that is always judging, comparing, resisting. But when you are anchored in the body, you are anchored in reality. And reality is always peaceful, always complete, always enough. The third portal is what Eckhart calls the space between thoughts. Have you ever noticed that between one thought and another, there's a small space of silence, a space of pure awareness? Most people never notice this space. They are always focused on the thoughts, on the content of the mind. But the space is more important than the content, because the space is where you truly live. Thoughts come and go and the space remain. And when you learn to inhabit this space, you become literally untouchable, because there's no one there to be attacked. There is only pure consciousness, observing the flow of life with complete serenity. These are not complicated techniques. They are simple recognitions, reminders of what you already are. But simplicity can be deceptive, because simple doesn't mean easy. The mind has a natural resistance to presence, because presence means the death of the ego. And the ego fights for survival. Eckhart went through this. We all go through this. There's what he calls the dark night of the soul. Moments where everything seems lost, where the pain is so intense that you can't find any portal to presence. In those moments, there's only one thing to do. Surrender completely. Don't fight. Don't resist. Don't try to escape. Just say, I don't know what to do. I surrender. And in the moment of total surrender, something extraordinary happens. The pressure disappears, the struggle ceases, and in place of suffering, a deep peace emerges. A peace that doesn't depend on external circumstances, a peace that is your essential nature. Eckhart experienced this extremely on that night in 1977, but you don't need to hit rock bottom to access this peace. You can surrender now, to this moment, to this situation, to this emotion you're trying to avoid. And when you surrender, you discover that there was never anything to fear. There was never anything that could really hurt you. There was only resistance. And the resistance was optional. Let me tell you another story. A story that shows how this works in extreme situations. There was a man who was diagnosed with terminal cancer. Doctors gave him 3 months to live. At first, he panicked. Anger, despair. He underwent every treatment possible. He fought the disease with all his might, but nothing worked. The cancer continued to spread. Then, someone gave him a book by Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. At first, he resisted. How can a book help me when I'm dying? But in the hospital land with nothing to do, he started to read, and something clicked. He understood that he was fighting against death, resisting what might happen, living in fear of the future. But what was happening now? Now he was alive. Now he was breathing. Now he was present. He stopped fighting the cancer, stopped resisting the possibility of death, and began to live completely in the present. And something miraculous happened. Not a physical miracle, a much deeper miracle. He discovered that he wasn't afraid of death, because he discovered that what he really was could never die. The body could die. The personality could die. But the consciousness that observed all this was eternal. And when you know you are eternal, death loses all its power over you. He lived for 2 more years, 2 years of total peace, 2 years of deep gratitude, 2 years of unconditional presence. And when he finally died, he died smiling, because he knew he was just changing form, that the essence of who he was would continue forever. This story may seem extreme, but the principle is the same for all life situations. When you stop resisting what is, you discover that nothing can really hurt you. When you stop fighting against life, you discover that life is not fighting against you. When you stop trying to control everything, you discover that you already are everything. This is what spiritual masters of all traditions have discovered. Buddha, Jesus, Lao Tzu, Rumi. They all pointed to the same fundamental truth. You are not what you think you are. You are much more than that. You are life itself, expressing itself through a temporary human form. And life cannot be destroyed. It can only change form. When you understand this viscerally, not intellectually, but in every cell of your being, everything transforms. You stop living in fear. Stop defending yourself constantly. Stop building emotional walls, because there's nothing left to protect. There is only life, flowing through you, living through you, loving through you now. And this life is invulnerable, not because it's strong, but because it's not a thing that can be broken. It is pure energy, pure consciousness, pure love. But how do you integrate this understanding into practical life? How do you apply this at work, in relationships, in daily challenges? Eckhart Tolle teaches something he calls radiant presence. It's when you're not just present, but when your presence positively impacts everything around you. When you're in radiant presence, people feel better in your company, without you doing anything specific, without trying to help or heal anyone. Your mere presence becomes a field of peace, a field of possibility, a field of healing, and this happens naturally when you're no longer defending an identity, when there's no ego to be fed or protected. All your energy becomes available to radiate unconditional love. This isn't something you do, it's something you allow, something that emerges naturally when you stop blocking the flow of life. It's like removing a dam from a river. The water doesn't need to learn to flow, it simply flows. Your natural love doesn't need to learn to radiate. It simply radiates when you remove the obstacles. And what are those obstacles? Thoughts of separation, emotions of defensiveness, beliefs of inadequacy. All of this dissolves in pure presence. And when it dissolves, you become a direct channel for universal intelligence, for wisdom that transcends the personal mind. Your words begin to come from a deeper place. Your actions emerge from crystal clear clarity. Your decisions reflect a wisdom you didn't even know you possessed. This is what happens when you live from presence. You become an instrument of life, a portal through which the divine expresses itself. And in this state you are literally invincible, not because nothing can affect you, but because you are that which affects everything. You are the source, not the vessel. But let me be practical for a moment. How can you begin to cultivate this radiant presence today? Start small, very small. In your next conversation, try being totally present with the other person, not thinking about what you'll say next, not judging, not analyzing, just present, listening not only to the words but the essence behind the words, and observe what happens. The person feels seen, heard, understood. And you discover that when there's no personal agenda, when there's no ego trying to project itself, the conversation flows naturally. Wisdom emerges, compassion arises, connection happens, effortlessly, without technique, just presence. Or try this. The next time someone criticizes or attacks you verbally, instead of reacting or defending yourself, take a deep breath and connect with the space within you, that space that observes without judging, that space that simply is, and from that space respond, or simply remain silent. You'll be surprised by the result. The other person's aggression will find no fuel, no resistance to feed on, and often the person will realize their own aggression and calm down naturally. You have become a mirror of peace, and peace is contagious. This doesn't mean you can't set boundaries. It doesn't mean you should accept abuse. It means you can set boundaries from a place of clarity, not reactivity. You can say no from love, not fear. And when you do that, your words have a different power, an authority that comes from a much deeper place. People feel this, and they respond differently. Because when you're not attacking or defending, you create a safe space for truth to emerge. And in truth, all conflicts resolve themselves naturally. But perhaps the most powerful application of this understanding is in your relationship with yourself. How many times a day do you criticize yourself, judge yourself, mentally attack yourself? How many times do you resist your own feelings, fight against your own thoughts, reject parts of yourself? This internal war is the source of all suffering, and it's completely unnecessary. When you understand that you are pure consciousness, you stop identifying with the content of your experience. Thoughts arise and pass. Emotions emerge and dissolve. Sensations appear and disappear. And you remain, observing everything with infinite compassion. like a mother observing a child playing, with unconditional love, without judgment, without the need to control. And when you treat yourself with this compassion, something miraculous happens. You heal, naturally and effortlessly, because healing isn't something you do, it's something you allow. And when you allow healing in yourself, you become an agent of healing for others. Your mere presence becomes medicine. Your acceptance becomes transformation. This is what Eckhart calls the new human, not someone who has transcended humanity, but someone who has fully integrated divinity into humanity. Someone who lives in the world, but is not of the world. Someone who participates fully in the human experience, but remains rooted in eternal consciousness. And this state is available to you, now, in this moment. It's not something you need to achieve. It's something you need to recognize. It's not something you need to become. It's something you already are. You just forgot, temporarily. And now you're remembering. And in the moment of that remembering, everything you thought defined you begins to dissolve. The body of pain, the wounded identity, the victim story, and all of this is revealed as a mirage, as a dream, as a temporary illusion. And what remains is what has always been there, pure, untouched, eternal. You, not the small version of you that needs protection, not the limited version that is afraid, but the real you, infinite, unlimited, indestructible. And when you live from this place, everything becomes possible. Because there are no more self-imposed limitations, no more beliefs of separation. There is only love, expressing itself as life, as you. And this love knows no fear, knows no limitation, knows no impossibility. It simply loves, unconditionally, eternally. And you are that love, not in the future, not after you've meditated for years, not when you finally become enlightened. Now, this very moment. And when you understand this, really understand it, you realize there was never anything to protect. There was never anything that could be lost. There was never anything that could be hurt. There was only love, pretending to be vulnerable. Love, playing at being limited. Love, experiencing the illusion of separation. But the game is over. The illusion has dissolved. The truth has been revealed. You are indestructible. Not because you built armor, but because you discovered there is nothing there to be destroyed. Only eternal consciousness, dancing as a human form. And this dance is beautiful. This experience is precious. This life, it's sacred. Not in spite of human vulnerability, but because of it. Because it's through vulnerability that love expresses itself most fully. And you are that love, eternal, infinite, unshakable. And now you know, forever.